Hello, we are headed into week 4 of week 6 in our mindful parenting class. I wanted to make sure that I give credit to Cornell University and the fact that I'm a therapeutic crisis intervention teacher through Cornell. And part of my training is also to teach families therapeutic crisis intervention. So some of the language overlaps with my teachings in therapeutic crisis intervention or TCI. So I wanted to make sure that I give credit where credit is due. This week we're going to focus on how to process through feelings and emotions and behaviors with our kids. And we are also going to do quite a bit of review on what we've learned in the last 4 weeks, because the more we practice, the easier it is to revert to some of our healthy parenting strategies when we're frustrated. So some of us have been meeting on Wednesday evenings to review the slides together and talk about all of our personal experiences. And so I just wanted to remind people that if they choose to join us, that what we talk about is confidential and we respect one another. It's a safe place to exchange our parenting experiences. We have some humor, some learning, some sharing. People participate to the level in which they're comfortable, and there is some risk taking. We feel a little bit vulnerable when we are sharing some of our experiences, but I truly feel like when we name it, we tame it, and we can always move forward and settle in a little bit more comfortably to new ways of parenting too. So if you feel like joining us, I hope to see you this week. We've talked a lot about our self-awareness, and this is a tool that I wanted to share with you guys this week. This is another way to look at who we are, and there are different facets of who we are. The first one being open and free, like you know that that's a part of me, and I know that that's part of me. And then there's a part of ourselves that we are kind of blind to, but other people know about us. And then there's the part where we hide from other people and they don't know it about us. And then there's a part of us that is unknown to us and to other people. And so really exploring all of the parts of ourselves is truly an important aspect of not only parenting, but relationships with adults too. And when we feel free to become more open to the different parts of ourselves, then healing happens for us as adults, but also is encouraged to happen with kids. So sometimes we think about the parts of ourselves that are kind of exiled and shamed, and we try to hide that little 7-year-old part of ourselves that was embarrassed or made to feel bad for something we did or said, and that part of us is still inside. And if that part is still inside and hiding, then that's sometimes the part that comes out when we're just like, oh my gosh, where did that come from? So being mindful about all of the different parts of ourselves is certainly a part of our human evolution that during COVID is being put right in our lap. It is harder and harder to hide all of the parts of ourselves from ourselves and from other people. So who is it that you want to be? What kind of parent do you want to be? What kind of neighbor? What kind of family member? What kind of work partner do you want to be? What are your likes and what are your loves? And how can you impact the planet in a more positive way? Okay, so all of this ties in to how we parent. So remembering that a crisis occurs, an emotional crisis, a physical crisis, something happens when our child's ability to cope results in a change of their behavior. Like they can't deal with it. We can't deal with it. Whatever it is, all of a sudden we can't cope. So what mindfulness practice does, and mindful parenting does, is gives us words, a common language to help us link with our child so that they can learn new coping strategies so that they don't have to continue to bury those feelings, and that when they come out, they can come out in a way that is safe physically and emotionally for themselves and for those around them. Remember that when we are teaching new ways of being, our job as a parent is to support the environment and support our kids emotionally to reduce stress and risk to them and to teach them a better way to cope. And so remembering, instead of saying things like, what's wrong with you? Why did you do that? Asking, what happened to you? What happened? What's going on? When somebody asks us what happened, it sounds a lot different than what's wrong with you. Okay? We've gone over the stress model of crisis over and over again, but remember that we all have a baseline. Our kids have a baseline. Part of our parenting responsibility is to know truly what our own child's baseline is, the things that might agitate them, what has triggered them in their mind or in their environment. Are they continuing to get more and more upset, and what can we do to bring them down to recovery so that we can teach them a new skill, a new way of being, processed through what's happening with them. And remembering that when we bring them down to recovery, we can be an educateur, meaning we help them learn something new, or we're just putting out the fire and moving on. Or when we are yelling and screaming or feeling like we are out of control, we start to create the feeling of them not being good enough, that they should feel ashamed for what they're feeling or how they're behaving, instead of helping them get to the root of why they're feeling that way and making the behavior choices that they are. Remember, always asking ourselves the 4 questions. What am I feeling now? So going into that self-awareness. What does my child feel, need, or want? How's the environment impacting them? And then how do I best respond? Again, over and over and over again, these 4 questions have to come to our mind anytime we're dealing with anybody, adult or child, who is dysregulated. We respond to other people by providing an environment that's supportive, by providing emotional support, and exercising our own self-control. Again, we have to stay calm in the chaos with our children. Okay, we're teaching them, they're watching what we're doing. So again, remembering that we need to know ourselves and not be afraid to explore our own thoughts, feelings, and behaviors based on our imprinting from our childhood, our worldview, okay? So not only do we do these different pictures of feelings with kids, but we need to ask ourselves too, what am I feeling now? And if I'm feeling scared, where is that coming from? If I'm feeling frustrated, where is that coming from? First, going into yourself before we can really help our kids understand their feelings. Remembering that when we are our angriest or our saddest or our most frustrated, whatever the emotion is, when we are in that emotional state and our body is dysregulated and physiologically we're pumping out adrenaline and we are pumping out cortisol and we are thinking that we are going to have to fight, run, or hide, we are not attached to our highest executive functioning. Okay, so remembering that for our kids too. What am I feeling now? In stressful situations, we get triggered by our own negative thoughts and beliefs. And when we have those negative feelings, they seem to feed off of our negative thoughts. Like it becomes worse and worse and worse. And they contribute to our physical symptoms and they contribute to our kids' physical symptoms. And identifying our physical symptoms helps us to replace those negative thoughts with positive statements. Okay, so mindfulness is getting in touch with, where am I feeling? I've got butterflies in my stomach. My shoulders are really tight. I have a headache. I can't catch my breath. My palms are sweaty. My heart is beating really fast. My underarms are sweaty. Like getting in tune with what's going on inside of your own body and teaching our kids to get in touch with what's going on in their body and then attaching a feeling to it, naming the feeling, and then attaching the feeling to the behavior that it makes us want to exhibit. And then examining, okay, if I use my mindfulness and my breath, and I calm my body physiologically, and I can connect to the prefrontal cortex, what decisions do I want to make to move forward? And the more we practice that, we set our new neural pathways into motion, and then we can start letting go of our old belief systems, our old thought systems, and the behaviors that we attach to those. I like to think of emotions as energy in motion, okay? So anytime we feel emotions, like we feel it in our body and it's truly energy in motion. If we feel stuck and helpless, like we kind of feel heavy and depressed and sad and withdrawn, like there's just not a lot of energy that's moving through us, okay? But it's still energy that feels stuck. When we are hyperactive, super vigilant, we can just feel it in our body, okay? So emotions, positive or negative, can start to cloud our judgment and make us react to a situation maybe inappropriately. So sometimes when we're too like anxious and excited, we can act in a way that's like, oh my gosh, just take a deep breath and calm down. So we have to figure out for ourselves what triggers us in order to really help our kids figuring out what's triggering them. What are they thinking? What are we thinking? What are they feeling? What are we feeling? And what do we do to respond to those feelings? And what do they do to respond to those feelings? Okay, so we're their parents and we're their boss and we're their teacher in a sense, but we're really teaching others or teaching each other. Our kids are mirroring a lot of the thoughts, feelings, emotions, behaviors that we still need to forgive and move through. Okay. So knowing your child is very important. Knowing, again, what are their pain-based behaviors. So pain-based behaviors are anytime that you are coming off of your baseline. So they might be impulsive or they might be aggressive. They might like run from you or punch themselves or punch a wall and hurt their hand, be defiant of you. They can't regulate what's going on. Trauma doesn't necessarily mean something, a huge event. even small events not processed through feel traumatizing to a kid. They're traumatic events. Okay, so just kind of noticing, oh geez, ever since this happened, my child has been acting in this way. Or when we talk about this, my child acts in this way. There's some sort of trauma reenactment that's happening in their mind and in their body, and it's our job to help them put those pieces together. So questions to ponder as we are working with our kids. What is their baseline behavior like? Is this typical behavior for them? Is this normal behavior for their developmental stage? Does this reflect our own family's worldview? Is this pain-based behavior related to something that happened in the past that scared them or worried them or made them feel ashamed? And what feeling is your child trying to express through their behavior? Are your activities and routines, what's happening with them? Is it causing them frustration or boredom or anger? Can they really fully participate? Can they move about? Is there enough space? Is it building on strength for them, or is it making them feel like it's pointing out what they're not good at? And it doesn't mean that we run away from the things that we're not good at. It's teaching them, how do you deal with the fact that maybe you're not as athletic as your sibling, or your sibling gets math a lot easier than you do? Like, how do we point out to ourselves and other people that we're not the best at everything and that that's okay? And are we allowing the individuals in our family or in the setting to agitate each other? And what can we do to bring more peace maybe to the situation without solving the problem for them? How do we work on collective problem solving even within our family unit? Active listening, again, we did a lot of work with active listening last week, but using active listening and reflective statements to de-escalate our kids, focus on feelings, and discover the underlying cause for the behavior. Remembering our nonverbal techniques, that we use silence sometimes, give space and time, just nodding, taking a deep breath, keeping our facial expression neutral, and making eye contact softly and not pointed, showing empathy for our child. Remember that when we become elevated and our kids become elevated, our brain can only take in, again, 55% of what they take in is what our body looks like, what our facial expression is, what our tone of voice is, only 7% of words. So kids can't learn anything academically or behaviorally when they're not at baseline. We can't learn anything and retain the information when we're not at baseline, okay? So encouraging and eliciting techniques. So we are trying to get kids to calm. We're draining off the emotion. We're having a calm tone of voice. We are saying, okay, I'd like to hear more about that. Do you like that, teacher? What happened? And asking, like, how did you respond? What did you do next? Just encouraging them to keep talking. Using those reflective statements, just repeating back to them when you feel uncomfortable. You feel uncomfortable when your friends are talking about school and you're not at school. Just giving back to them exactly what they said to you. We did a lot of work with that the last couple of weeks. So now we're moving up the continuum of co-regulating with our kids, and this is from that TCI model. We've done the self-awareness, we have practiced our active listening, and now we're moving up into behavior support techniques. This is when the active listening isn't working just in and of itself, and so we are going to pull some other tricks out of our bag, okay? So we're still not being intrusive. We're still really relying on the relationship that we have with our child, and we're trying to interfere with that elevation of that crisis model, okay? The goal is to intervene at the warning sign and to help the young person regulate and stop the escalation process and return them back down to their baseline. Behavior support techniques. Some of them would be redirection and distraction, using proximity, using directive statements, using some time away if we need to, managing the environment, prompting, caring gesture, hurdle help. So we're going to go over what those are. So a lot of times we're doing all of these things as parents, but when we can start to understand that there truly is a continuum of our strategies that we pull out of our toolbox, when you understand what you're doing, then you can more clearly feel like, okay, I know where I need to go with this next. All right, so we've done our self-awareness, we've done our reflective statements, affirmed them. They still seem agitated, so we're going to try some of these other things, and we're going to name them so that you know what they are, but I can guarantee you've done all of them without knowing that they necessarily have a name attached. So the first one is managing the environments, really looking at the physical setting, placement of yourself and others in comparison to where they are. What are some of the setting conditions that we've talked about before, and what might be triggering them in the environment? So prompting is something that we do a lot as parents. It signals our child to either begin or stop an inappropriate behavior. They could be verbal or nonverbal, so we might do like, hold on, thumbs up. It cues them what's expected without drawing attention to them. So sometimes we have an agreement with kids, like if you need something from mom during the soccer game because you feel like you're not doing a good job, just look over at me and I'll give you a thumbs up. I'll tell you it's okay, right? So we're prompting them without anybody else really knowing what's happening around us. A caring gesture is, I don't know, doing this, something that is verbal or nonverbal that is a head nod or a quiet good job or thumbs up. Okay. Hurdle help is actually helping with the first few steps of the process. So it might be helping them with the first few math problems, or we're going to clean your room. I'll help you start with your drawers, or whatever it is. But we get them going on something, and once they get going, then they understand and feel more comfortable. Redirect and distract, so diverting the person or kind of the whole group to a different activity, an activity that is maybe less stressful or frustrating for them. Sometimes I do something like, oh my gosh, did you see my new earrings today? Redirection and distraction, I say, is my most favorite behavior support technique. Oh my gosh, I just broke my nail. Oh geez, did you see that bird fly by? When you use distraction or redirection, it automatically changes our brain out of what we're focused on. So you can't think about two things at the same time. So if you just quickly refocus to something like, oh my gosh, we just drove by and did you see that squirrel was getting chased by a bird, and the kid looks over, even if they're having a tantrum or a meltdown in that moment, and just for a second, it takes their attention away from that and gives an opportunity to just, and then you might use a different topic to start talking about that's totally away from the tantrum or what they're angry about for that moment, just so that their bodies can relax and we can start talking about what's happening. Proximity, so moving closer to your child when they are needing you, kind of leaning in, going up, sitting on the couch with them, on their bed with them. May involve just touching them on the shoulder or something, but you're pulling yourself closer to them without making it a huge deal. Directive statements, we need to be careful with this because we don't want to escalate the situation. But sometimes it's like, I need you to put down the crayon and stop drawing on the table. Put down the crayon. And again, you're not yelling. You aren't grabbing it from them. You're just giving them a direction. I need you to go put your bowl in the sink. And again, you're not getting into a fight with them, but you're just giving them a directive statement. Time away is also something that we need to be careful with, that we're not screaming, get up to your room, but sometimes you can say like, hey, can you take this and go give this to your dad? Can you put some food in the dog's bowl? Anything like that that's just getting them away from the situation so that you can help deal with maybe the other sibling that is having a meltdown with them or had been fighting with them. You're just sending them out of the situation. The next area that we're moving up to is called emotional first aid. And we're not going to spend a whole lot of time on this because we're going to cover it a little bit more next week too. But I wanted you to see how we're going to keep moving up this continuum. Last week in our group, we talked about really needing to get to what do we do to talk through some of the situations. So we're going to focus on that a little bit more this week. So emotional first aid is, again, draining off the emotions, clarifying the event, working on continuing to keep the relationship positive, and reminding the child of the expectation. But you are still wanting to keep them in the situation that we're in. Okay, so no matter where you are, whether it's at home or out in the community or at school, the goal is to keep them in that setting just to drain off the emotions and give them enough support that they can move on and pay attention to what's being asked of them. So we want to see it from their perspective, helping them connect their feelings and their behaviors, encouraging them that they're responsible for their actions, but it's very much in the moment, okay? Like, shh, I just need you to sit quietly right now while we finish watching this part of the movie, and then we can go upstairs. Whatever that might be. You're just band-aiding the situation. You're providing immediate support, resolving the immediate crisis, and you're keeping them in the activity. So again, draining off the emotions, clarifying the events, keeping the relationship and lines of communication open, and reminding the child of the expectations. You want to know that you believe that they can successfully stay in the activity. You'll have time to talk about it later if you need to. And then keeping in mind that all the while your child's brain is processing information. You know, what's being triggered in the amygdala through the five senses, holding on to memories, bringing up memories, creating new memories in the hippocampus, and all the while trying to process information to make a good decision in the prefrontal cortex. Okay, so always keeping in mind that there's a lot of activity happening in the brain, even when all we're seeing is the behavior. Remembering that the conflict cycle depends most importantly on what our response is to their emotions, their energy and motion. When we move up, because the child is not calming down, we move into what's called crisis co-regulation. So this is when we're really at that tantrum, throwing things, maybe biting or hitting, really, really frustrated. What can we do to assist in calming the child down, keeping people safe, and bringing them back down to baseline so that we can talk about what's happening? In crisis co-regulation, we're asking three things: what to think, what to do, and what to say. What to think is to ask yourself those four questions. What am I feeling? What do they need? What's happening in the environment? How do I best respond? What to do when they're amping up like that is you're going to take a deep breath. When we teach that sometimes kids become physically violent in situations, we're just taking a protective stance, okay? We're not jumping in. We're just kind of standing back, giving the situation time, sitting down if appropriate, remembering your body and facial expressions, okay? So especially as kids are getting older, when our kids are in elementary and they have little bodies, you know, we can just like grab them when they're having a tantrum and like move them from one situation to another. But when we move into preteen and teen bodies, we're not going to be able to do that. Putting hands on is just going to get ourselves hurt or them hurt. What to say, again, we're taking a deep breath, protective stance, stepping back, giving the situation time, sitting down if appropriate, remembering our body language and facial expressions. And what to say is very little, very little. We're giving time and space. And then this is the part that you guys really wanted to focus on last week, is what's called the life space interview. That is where we really want to isolate the conversation, explore the student's point of view is what we call it in education. We're going to say the child's point of view here, summarize their feelings and the content of what happened, connect the feelings and behaviors, talk about alternative behaviors, and make a plan and practice the new behavior. And I've outlined that a little bit in more detail for you, and this is what we're going to practice this week.